Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BizDev Podcast. My name is David Baxter. I'm your host. Our podcast is about developing your business and startups and tech and entrepreneurship and everything in between. I am joined today by two people. One is Gary, the chicken farmer Voigt. How's that one? I did pretty good. Huh? Pretty good.
Yeah,
all right. And we're, aside from Gary, we won't talk to Gary. He's boring. All right, we are joined today by a very special guest, Carlton White, who is the CEO and of Visionary Business Brokerage. So we'll be talking to him about his business and how we got started in just a little bit. But first, Gary, you want to talk about some islands? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I came with a pretty catchy little headline for our show notes that I'm not alone on this island. Everybody's got to be talking about the dynamic island now for the new, what is it, the iPhone 14 Pro? It's only on the Pro as we know.
It's on the Pro. Because, have you bought your phone? Have you bought it?
Of course not. And I'm never going to get the new one when it first comes out. I usually wait.
Oh, see, you're much more, but you're better than I am. I have already bought it. It will be here on Friday. I got the purple one. I'm feeling very masculine.
Purple one is the
with
coolest
my purple.
looking one.
I always try to go for the colors. Carlton, are you much into the nerd stuff? Do you get excited about the phones as they come out, or are you kind of chill about all that?
Well, I'm kind of an old guy. I remember my first cell phone. You had to go to the garage and have it mounted in the car, and I never gave anybody the telephone number because you had to pay by the minute, and it was really expensive. So that's kind of my background. So I guess you could say I'm dragged kicking and screaming into the tech area because I realize the advantage of it, but I'm a slow adapter, I would say.
So it's funny you mentioned the car phone or the old portable phones. My dad was a realtor, or I shouldn't say that. He would get mad at me. He was a custom home builder, and he was in the 80s. He had the big fancy car because all guys who sell houses have to have big fancy cars because they have clients in them. And he had a car phone. And I just thought that made him the coolest person ever. It had a big old thick cord in it.
I was going to ask if it was corded to the center console of the car. Yeah.
It was built into the car.
It had an antenna on the top, somehow or another stuck out.
Big old antenna, and it was mounted. I can't imagine what these things would have cost back then, but it was built into a center console, and it had these big, bright green buttons that were like the gummy type. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. And you would call, and I never knew I never had the phone number. It was mainly just calling out. Like it was just you called out and you hung up, and that was so. Anyway, so I totally understand that. So I am a huge iPhone nerd. We've talked about it a billion times. I'm a whole huge phone nerd. I know all the phones.
Yeah, well, in our business as well, we're heavily building stuff for phones. So we have to become accustomed with the way the phones look, work, sizes, operating systems, and everything.
Well, sure. That's my business excuse for my taxes. It's for business purposes. I have to have the newest iPhone every year for testing purposes, guys. Testing purposes. I got to see how the island works, in person. No. I am excited about the island. That's my favorite. That's my favorite new feature is the island.
Yeah, everybody makes fun of the name, but then when they see it in action, they're pretty impressed. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand when you have all the money in the world how you come up with the name of a dynamic island. Seriously?
Well, same company that came up with the name Slofi. So, I mean,
fair.
Their names aren't the greatest, but
they are not the greatest at naming names. That is shoot. Well, they have the iPad too, right? Remember back when that came out? Everyone thought it was a feminine product.
Yeah.
Just bad naming, but it's okay. Now it's ubiquitous, and I'm sure it'll be shortened at some point. No one's calling it. It's too many syllables, but they will. The island or whatever. But I do love the idea, and that's my favorite thing. I'm looking forward to that and camera. But I'm not a photographer, so I don't. All I know is when my idiot self takes a picture. Oh, that looks nice. That's the end of it. That's as good as I can get. I'm just can't get into that stuff. But I've told the story. I think I went to Washington, D.C. 2019 before pandemic, and we were on the World War II Memorial, which if you've never seen it is this gorgeous pool, quiet pool. It's looking straight down the mall. And so you're looking right at the Lincoln Memorial. and it's surrounded by these gorgeous sculptures. I'm not even sure if that's the right word. It's all these chiseled depictions of the war. It is amazing. And you're allowed to take your shoes off and sit and put your feet in. That's allowed. You're not allowed to go frolic or anything. That's disrespectful. But you can sit and put your feet in and reflect on the memorial and stuff. So it's nighttime. My daughter and my wife are sitting there, and I don't even know. It was whatever the newest phone was, the 10 maybe. It was right before night mode came out. And I'm taking pictures of them, and they look like zombies because the only thing that would work was the flash. And so that always made me angry. And then that was the summer, and then that fall they came out with night mode. I was like, oh, come on.
Too late.
And so too late. But that's and it's never happened again. I've never needed night mode since. No, I'm just kidding. But that was the last thing I noticed in the camera. I'm curious what 48 megapixels will do.
Well, that seems to be a lot of processing into the photo. Then that's going to be actually pretty amazing, because there is one thing that Apple does well. It's not bump up the megapixels just for a spec increase, but they'll actually make the photos look better. So I think that the extra megapixels will help them output larger photos looking as good as they do. But we still haven't talked about the island. We've danced all around the iPhone.
You tell us what the island is, because no one knows. You're going to release it.
So the coolest thing about the island is the fact that they took this little hardware notch that they tried to make invisible, and then they added interactive, like whether you want to call them notifications or modal windows or whatever, but they turned it into a feature on the phone that you are going to use and interact with, and that can show you stuff as you're using different apps like the maps and the messages and stuff. And if that doesn't make it disappear when you're going to see it as an eyesore, that's, to me, it was just super impressive. Very creative way to take care of the little thing that everybody's probably going to pick on the most.
I will say that the island it's nice to see Apple do something unique. Because Apple they are the world's greatest thief. They steal, like, for instance, the camera we were talking about before, the binning and all of that they're doing, that's been around on Samsung for years. But when Apple comes out with it, they make it sound like, oh my goodness, this has never been done before. And you're seeing it for the first time here. And so everyone knows that, everyone jokes about that. But this island thing is truly theirs, and it's truly unique. And I think you're going to see a lot of copycats of it, because I think it's going to be, like you said, it's not an eyesore anymore. It's now a feature of the phone. You can't get rid of the black bar because, well, you can.
Need the front-facing
I suppose
camera.
Samsung's trying with the cameras behind the screens, but
it's not working
still got
well.
its own problems.
Yeah.
So that's the thing I'm looking forward to most. I am a little nervous that the camera, if you look at the back of the phone, that camera bump is ginormous.
Yeah, I have a feeling the cases for these phones are going to be pretty thick.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's going to be a pain in the butt to get in and out of your pocket, just because you now have this. You used to have these little nubs. Now you got some, like, pipes coming out of the back of this thing.
If you don't use a case, it might be a little awkward. But are you a case or a non-case kind of guy?
I'm a non-caser typically. I have a case on my phone right now because I dropped it and it cracked, and I didn't want to replace it. So now I have a case, but I typically do not like cases. To me, it's like you buy the beautiful phone. I want to feel it. I want to feel how it's supposed to be. And but my son has followed suit. This is a true story. This weekend, he was out at this event, the City Throws in our little town, and he drops his phone on the concrete. The back is just shattered, and it's the worst I've seen because the back is broken so bad that now the metal underneath the glass is now exposed. It is bad. So he is pretty upset about it because I'm making him pay for the repairs.
Duct tape.
He's got surgical tape on it right now because it wasn't too sticky.
We will include links to a couple things about the iPhone and the island in the show notes if you want to check it out. I'm sure by now everybody that listens to us has probably already seen it and is pretty impressed by it. If not, then you can leave me a comment and a message.
Anyway, I would like to talk to Carlton because I think he's very interesting. Carlton, this is fascinating. So Tell me in a nutshell what Visionary Business Brokerage is, and then I will have a million questions.
Okay, we're a small, actually a one-person shop right now. I've had a couple of people where right now I have just myself, and I specialize in being non-specific, and mainstream businesses are what I'm looking for, and that would be in total sales businesses that are like $500,000 to $5 million total sales per year. And we help people decide whether they're going to sell their business, help them market it, help them get it ready to sell. It's a two sales cycle business, not a whole lot unlike commercial real estate, in that we have to find a seller, and then we also have to find a buyer, and then we have to marry those two and work the deal out and do the financing and all that stuff. So very interesting business to me. It's an opportunity for me to get to know a lot of people and their businesses and how they operate. Meet a lot of interesting buyers that are looking for different things as far as the companies that they're looking to buy, and just trying to help folks out to make their whatever they want to do with their businesses, make it happen.
So how did you get into that? Because it seems like you've got to know like everyone to make a business like that work. So how did you, like, what is your history that got you there?
When I first started in business, I had an optical wholesale company. We made eyeglasses, and came time to sell it, and I was looking to figure out how to do that, and I ran into a husband-wife team that were business brokers, and they put a deal together with a guy out of Ohio. His grandmother died. He'd come into some money, and he actually moved his whole family down. I'm from Durham, North Carolina. Moved the whole family down, and they bought the business. And I thought, man, that's a great job. I didn't get enough from my business to retire. I was too young, too. I needed to have another job. And I thought, that's the job I want. But I have mortgages and kids to educate and that type thing. So I didn't do that. I had a friend who was in the financial services business, stockbroker. And so he hired me. And so for about 25 years, I did that. But this business brokerage thing never got out of my mind. It was always in there, always thinking, this is what I really want to do. And so I just kept up with how it working, who was doing it, who was buying, how they were buying and selling. And then, of course, like your story about buying iPhones, it was a situation where I was doing a lot of research and figuring out what I wanted to do once it was time to get out of the financial services business. And that actually happened about 3 years ago. By that time I'd parlayed up to a big outfit. I don't know if I'm supposed to mention who I was working with, but they had a deal where they were buying out the old brokers. They had a bunch of older brokers. They had a bunch of young brokers. They didn't have very many in the middle, and their worst fear was that all the old brokers would leave, and then their clients would all leave. They didn't care about me very much, but they really wanted my clients. So they worked out an opportunity for me to, in effect, sell that business. So I sold that business back to the bank, and that's actually that's what I'm living on right now, is the payment that they paid me for my practice. But that experience on selling that business kind of gave me a pretty good background again in selling businesses. And then it was one of those stories where it was January the 31st was my last day. And so I retired on February the 1st and 2nd, which was a Saturday and a Sunday. And then that Monday I started Visionary. So I actually retired for 2 days. It was a miserable 2 days, but I got back in the saddle on Monday morning.
A little retire weekend.
Exactly. But then I wasn't completely charmed, because that was February the 1st of 2020. Now everybody knows what happens around the middle of March of 2020. So I got off to kind of a rocky start with Visionary. I was able to take and pass my real estate license, so I'm now a licensed realtor, which is helpful when it comes to collecting commissions and stuff. A lot of times a business in a building is sold at the same time, and in North Carolina, to take a commission on real estate, you have to be licensed. So I do have that under my belt. I did that during the pandemic.
So being a business broker is something that you actually had a passion for, that you just kept with.
Absolutely.
Regardless of what you were doing at the current time, until you had the opportunity again to revisit that.
Absolutely.
Now, there's a lot of startups, and David will tell you, that we've come in contact with that are, people who have had a passion that's just kind of been burning in the back of their head for a while, and they come to a point in their life, whether it's almost retiring for a weekend, or just saying, you know what, it's about time in my life now where I have the resources to try this. Let me go into that. And then that's when they start to try to really build up that business that they've had a passion for. So you are another case of that actually proving to be true, not just from what we see in startups.
I love this because most people have in their head that a startup founder, an entrepreneur, blah, 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 is a young person right out of school, and they are going and working on ramen noodles, and they, just do it right then. And those people exist. But in our experience, and we build startups of all types, of course, tech is what we do, but most of our people that we have run into are older, and I love having that fact be validated. We have one very similar to you. He sold his business and said, hey, I want to do something in a totally different atmosphere, and I want to do my own thing. And he started a startup. And we've had some that quit their job. They were in their 40s and said, you know what, this is what I love, and I'm going to do this. And they, like you were talking about, they have a little runway, and they buy themselves a period of time where they can do it. And I just love that. I love another example of someone doing exactly that. So business. So I have questions about your business all by itself, but I'm also fascinated by just starting the business in that slog. Now you're technically 2 years old. Is that right?
I'll be 3 years in February, so 2.5.
So 2.5 years old. Tell me about your first year. Now you had a really extra rough year because you had COVID at the same time. Did you just decide to put the business on hold and do the real estate thing full time? Getting your license and stuff. Or did you mush through that really rough time when everyone's freaking out in early 2020? Did you do both, or what did you do?
Well, I'd say mush through is a really good way to put it, because that's how I did it. But, there are lots of things to do when you start up a business. I was getting my website fixed. I was doing that kind of stuff. I was out networking everywhere I could go. Now, that was limited, too, because of, you couldn't go anywhere.
Sure.
But I was calling old friends. I was making contacts with my networks that I'd set up and used forever and ever. And just, and it was kind of fun. I made this goal to make 4 or 5 phone calls a day to old friends and just talk about what are they doing during the pandemic. And then, oh, by the way, I got this new thing I'm going on, and I'll, can I send you my email? Can I send you my new contact information? So that was a little method in the madness on that. But that kind of helped pass the time, frankly. And then this business that really is what it's all about. It's about making those relationships and having those relationships and I did a little talk to a commercial real estate firm not too long ago, and they were a bunch of your young men and women, and I made this statement like, I am my Rolodex, and they all looked at each other like, what's a Rolodex? but my point was that my value is the people I know. And so when I go into a deal, sure, I've got backup of experts, and then I, of course, use the term "stay in my lane" more than I can imagine, because I'm really serious about that, and I have some good advisors that work with me that I can pull in, lawyers and some real estate folks and things like that can come in and help me do the deals that I need to do, and I think that's a strength, not a, as your computer people say, that's a feature, not a bug, that I'm able to do that. and so I spent a lot of that time just doing those type of things, and I had a couple of listings, and so a few things came down the pike that actually went to fruition. But it was tough. It was hard. It really was hard. But it was a good thing that I didn't have that financial pressure to where it was do that or eat ramen noodles. I know I was fortunate for that, but that was all kind of part of the plan. No, COVID was not part of the plan. I wouldn't say that by any stretch of the imagination, but that's just how it worked out.
We've heard other startups and entrepreneurs, people are getting their business together, also reference like using friends and family as like the foundation network, and then building up from there. And also, when you said you were letting experts be experts and staying in your lane, like that's another thing that has proven to actually really help business people when you're not trying to have your hand in every single part of the business, and you do find people that you can trust that are experts in that field. Give them their time to do that so that you can focus on what you need to do. And that does seem to always benefit the business instead of micromanaging
Man, I tell
every
you,
aspect.
Gary totally stole my thunder here, but you spoke on accident. No, it's fine. You spoke without realizing you hit the heart of what we talk about all the time on this podcast is using like, so again, I mean, I'm beating the drum here, but you're able to, because you have experience, because you're not new to this, because you're not straight out of college, you have the Rolodex, right? You have a wealth of people to talk to and call upon in terms of potential clients, potential referrals, the network. If you're straight out of college, you don't have that. And I say this not to say that the startup people right out of college are bad, but I want to encourage people like you to take that plunge, because you bring so much to the table because of that experience, that life experience, that wealth of contact information that you have, especially in your line of work, where that's going to be so key. But also, I think younger people have a tendency to want to do it all. They don't have any money, right? So that's part of it, which is, I get it. They don't have any money and they don't have those contacts. So they feel like I've got to wear all the hats. And it takes, I think, experience and just, I guess that's the only word for it, experience to know that I need to stay in my lane. I love that phrase. You've got to stay in your lane because you're going to be very good at this, but you're not going to be very good at the whole thing. And it kind of reminds me when during the pandemic, I started building a video game. It's something I'd always wanted to do. And it's not any good, but I've been working on it and blinking on it. But one of the things I noticed was that video game stuff, when you're working on it, every single part of a video game is an entire career. Audio, animation, the game engine, et cetera, et cetera. It's an entire career that someone could dedicate their entire life to. And when you're doing it, you've got to pick a path really early on. This is what I can do. In my case, I could program. I can program, but I can't do art. I can't do animation. I can't do sound. I can't do any of that. So I have to find other ways to bring that to the table. And I think a startup is often like that. You're bringing a wealth of skill to the table, but it's not all the skills. and some people have more than others, but I think you're bringing up a perfect thing that I'm good at this and I'm going to bring this. And then everything else, I'm going to bring in friends and colleagues and stuff that I know to do, because especially in yours, very similar to what I was saying, I can only imagine every piece of your business is a career. You got the financing piece, you've got the legal piece, you got all these things that you can't necessarily do, but you have the contacts to bring together.
Yeah. Plus, just on the business side itself, like you were talking about your website, you have to build up your presence, your brand, your identity, and you have to start marketing it too. And you want to keep all that, cohesive, and you want to all tell the same story. So if you're not, someone who, creates brands or does marketing, you would probably have no idea where to start other than looking on Google for, how to market my business, and then end up with a bunch of junky free stuff to try to email out to people. Speaking on that, you mentioned your website.
He's just jealous because everybody hires Fiverr.
No, I'm not jealous. Hey, if they hire Fiverr, they get Fiverr.
So tell me a bit about, I think you're the first person I've met who's actually doing this. I've heard of people like you who's doing what you're doing, but I've never met one. So I'm fascinated by this. So let's say I wanted to sell my business. I don't, just to be clear. But let's say I did. What is the steps that I would do? How does that work? I find you. Hopefully your marketing is working. And, Carlton, he looks cool. Let's talk to him. Because, I would assume most business owners have no idea how to sell their business.
That's true. That's absolutely true. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll tell you my personal experience. And I don't have the statistics, but I can tell you that a lot is a number of the people at the business I talk to, I have decided that in my business, it's not worth me taking the listing. And mainly it's because the businesses aren't worth anything without the owner. So when I start talking with somebody, that's the first thing I tell them. I tell them, when you're looking at your business, you're looking at your own business, you have to think like a buyer. And I was talking to a friend of mine. He said, you ought to write a book, and the title ought to be "Think Like a Buyer," because if it's your business and you're the chief cook, bottle washer, turn on the lights, sweep up the floors, decide the pricing, and do everything, a buyer's going to look at that and say, I don't want to buy that, because when that guy's in Acapulco drinking Mai Tais, there's no business. And so, and I tell people every time I talk to them, I say, look at your business and pretend like you don't work there. What's that business worth? And so many times it's worth the client list, which is not very much when you compare that to what an actual ongoing business is worth.
And I would assume that client list is built on a relationship between that owner and the client as well. So it's not like a direct transfer. The client list can be as profitable.
Well, the caveat there is if you have a bunch of contracts that are actually signed contracts for a certain period of time, that might be a caveat. But even there, generally those contracts have things written in them, non-performance or something they can get out of those contracts. And so when a buyer is pricing a business and saying, this is what it's worth to me, it's just not going to be worth, especially what the sellers think it's worth. We go into these things all the time, and we think $5 million, and I'm looking at it, and the numbers say $1 million, and the owner is so involved that I couldn't even get $1 million for it. And my position is, I'm not going to list something for $5 million that I know is worth one. That way, all you can do there is disappoint people, and I'm just not going to do that. So those situations are pretty tough with people, but that's I think that's the visionary part, because the reason I like the word visionary is I look at these businesses and I say, look, let's do some visionary work. Let's look at this business and let's find some things that we can do so that we can continue this relationship. And in a couple of years, I'm still going to be here. You're still going to be here. But the things we're going to do with this business, it's going to be worth twice what it's worth right now. Because what we're going to do is we're going to make those decisions, and every decision we make, we're going to put a layer on top of that to say, if I was going to buy this business, would I make that decision? Would I buy that piece of equipment? Would I hire that person? Would I open this new territory? Would I take more time off? Would I be somebody that doesn't have to be there 24/7 to make that business work? Because then when I go to a buyer and I say, look, here's the perfect business. This guy lives in Mexico and he runs the business. He talks to his management team once a week on the phone, and the business runs. Because what the buyer says is, look, I'm pretty good at sales. Hypothetical buyer. I'm pretty good at sales. I don't know anything about the operations of this business. That operations part scares the heck out of me. So I can visualize myself selling whatever this thing is. I can't visualize myself running the day-to-day operation. And so I'm, as the broker, I'm going to say, this is the perfect business for you because that part of the business is taken care of. This guy's got a great operational team and they're working like clockwork. And so that gives that buyer the confidence to think that they can go in there and continue to run that business. And then, just from a marketing standpoint, the visionary part, I got that buyer thinking, what can we do to that business to increase the business? Because if the buyer goes in there and he says, this business is doing $1 million, and I know the finances work at $1 million, that's not good enough. I want to buy the business at $1 million, and in a relatively short period of time, I want it doing $2 million. Because when they entered that agreement with the seller, and they build that business from 1 million to 2 million sales, that difference in that million sales doesn't go to the seller, it goes to the buyer. And so if I can put together a package that shows reasonable marketing and reasonable growth and different strategies, and have somebody that has the vision to be able to see that, then that's where you can do some deals that are really made in heaven. And then the buyer gets what they want, the seller gets what they want for it reasonably. The buyer gets what he wants to pay for it reasonably, and then the buyer is able to get in there and do their entrepreneurial work, and then build that business up. So if you want the perfect deal, that's the deal right there. And And then David, you mentioned something that I think is really important too. And it's one reason why I'm really fired up about business brokerage of any kind going forward. I think there's a lot of people that 5 years ago, they were corporate, they had a good old job, they're secure, they were putting money in their 401k, everything was rocking right along. They had this crystal clear path of working at this company to whatever their goal is in life. All of a sudden, all those magical things are not there. And they're waking up in the middle of the night thinking, maybe working at this big company is not what I need to do. Maybe I do need to look around and start doing something else. And that's where I'm really excited about in the position that I'm in, because I'm able to go to those people and say, look, I know that working at IBM or wherever the heck you've been working has been a wonderful career, but we're offering opportunities for you to have something with your name on the door, not somebody else's name on the door. And we're able to take those people and show them how that they can own their own business. And if they have any kind of entrepreneurial spark in them at all, those are the kind of people that I'm really looking forward to working with on the buy side, and then matching them up on the sell side. And then one more thing, kind of while I'm on a roll, another thing that I've done several deals with actually are franchise, to where I'll take a business that has one location, and it's a person that comes in and we start talking business, and they'll say, I really need to grow. I know I've got this great business and it's really hot and I'm feeling really good about it. But right now is the time, but I don't know how to grow. And I'll tell them, I say, look, well, there's only three ways. One way is to grow it organically, do more business, add another product line, hire some salespeople, blah, blah, blah. Second way is you can find somebody that's in a competing business, competition to you, and buy them and grow that way. And the third way is take your business to franchise and have somebody, and then instead of you having to go to Atlanta and open up a branch and have to find the location and sign the leases and take the big financial risk and find the personnel, you sell that as a franchise to somebody in Atlanta. They're bringing their money, they're finding their location, they're signing the leases, and they're paying you a franchise fee and then paying you royalty. I tell them they have to have five things. Number one, they have to be in a growth mode, so they have to really be interested in growing. Number two is they have to have really strong management, and they have to have the energy to actually start another business, because taking your business to franchise is really starting a new business. Even though it's the same business, it's so much different. Like if you own a hot dog shop, selling hot dogs to the public is a whole lot different than finding a whole bunch of other people to buy your hot dog shop. The third thing is they have to be scalable, which in effect means that it has to be not too hard to set it up. It has to be fairly easy to set up. So in other words, if you had some secret that only 5% of the people knew how to do, you're probably not going to be a very good franchisor, because you can't find enough people to buy your franchise. But if it's a system set up that almost anybody could do, pretty good franchise opportunity for that person. And then the fourth thing is you've got to be able to differentiate yourself. The fourth thing actually is you got to be successful. You got to show that you have made money in your business, your current business. And then you set up the operation manuals and you set it up, and then that's actually what you're selling to the franchisees. That this is how I did it, and this is how I made money. And there's a lot of regulations. They can't show the regulations. They can't show their financials, but I can see that this is a company that is a profitable operation. And then the last thing is you have to be able to differentiate yourself. Why would I buy your hot dog stand rather than somebody else's hot dog stand? So if they answer yes or are enthusiastic about those five different things, then they should be looking into franchise. They should be looking into, how do I do this thing and go from a one shop or one location or 5 locations or 3 locations that I own to building a franchise brand.
Well, it's so interesting, because I've said this in the past, is one of the yellow flags that I hear when someone's coming up to me, because we build startups in terms of their tech and all of that. And when someone comes to me and they say, hey, I'm really looking to sell this in 5 years, that's like a big flag to me, because you're not getting, as you know, that first year of owning a business is a nightmare. and you are not going to get up and go what I call the slog every day if all you're looking for is a 5-year payday. If that passion isn't in you, you're not going to keep going because it's brutally difficult. And so, but you're now on the other side of that. Now you are the person that you would go to if I have done it right. I built up a business. I've gotten something that's got some value, and now it's time. Maybe it's taking me 5 years, maybe it's taking me 25 years, but I'm ready and I have got something that's really worth something. It's funny. So I'm in a business group called C12. I've mentioned it a few times, and I'm surrounded by guys who have family businesses. They've been around forever. Mine is one of the few that I'm the founder and started it. And what's interesting to me is they talk about, oh, if they sold their businesses, they would have multiples of this and multiples of that because they have inventory and warehouses and blah, 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 right? They're big, successful businesses. And when they talk about, like you mentioned before, a company like mine, which is founder-led, it's a consulting business, a lot of the business is tied to me just because I started it. And so my multiple on average is like 0.5. So it's always disheartening to me because it's like when I get old and I'm ready to hang it up and I'm ready to go to Acapulco, I just butchered that name, but I go to Hawaii, let's say that easier. I'm not going to have that big payday unless I do exactly what you're talking about, which is the easiest way I've been told is I have to clone me so that I can vanish and the business does not die.
It's like you have to turn the business itself into the product. So it's got to be able to work when you just turn it on and it goes.
To a point, yeah. I mean, it just has to. Big Pixel doesn't exist right now without me, not because I do all the work. That is certainly no longer true. It used to be true, but it's not true anymore. My guys are amazing. Gals and guys are amazing, but the clients still come to me, generally speaking. That relationship that I have with them is what keeps them coming back by and large. Now, over time, our guys do a great job. They now trust the processes that we put in place. But it is interesting to me because most people have businesses where they're the technician and they want to sell it and they don't realize all the things you just said. They don't realize. They think, well, I had made $2 million last year, so my company should be worth at least $2 million. No, no, that's not true at all. And it's nice to hear that. I mean, it's disheartening to hear that because I wish it weren't true. But you are proof that this is the way it works.
Well, just think like a buyer. If somebody said, look, what's the very best advice you can give to current business owners? That would absolutely be it. Every business decision you make, you are going to buy that business because you know your business better than anybody. You know what's good about it. You know what's bad about it. You know what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. And so if a buyer is coming in to look at your business, that's the lens that you want to look through. And you want to say, if I bring on a dozen salespeople, if I add this product, if I do this, is that going to make me more attractive or less attractive to a buyer? And I think and it's kind of funny. I can tell you that more than, 10 times I've had these conversations with business owners when they're thinking about selling, and I'll tell them that, and they say these things. They say, I wish I'd met you 2 years ago.
It seems like it's a process that you would have to start as soon as you feel like you're going to sell. So
and to me, I love that because that's kind of my business model. Now, it's not going to make me much money now, but I think if I can make the impression on people and actually give them some ideas and some things to do so that 2 years from now we can look at it. And I work commission. That's all I get. I don't charge by the hour. And so if I've got somebody who has $1 million business and I make 10% on that, you can do the math on that. But if we build that business to a $7 million business in 2 years, which check would you rather cash? And so, pretty simple. And it's a slog. It's just like you said, David. It's a slog for me because I'm sitting there saying I don't want that business now. I want that business 2 or 3 or 4 years from now. And so, and then my challenge is to make enough of an impression on them that 2 or 3 or 4 years from now they'll call me back, and I'll be sending them free pins and stuff in the meantime, so they'll remember my name. But that's kind of how I'm looking at building my business. And again, I know people talk about, are you profitable? Is your business profitable? I'd say my business is cash flow positive. How about that? So, if I had to live on what I've taken out of it, I'd be pretty sad. But I'm building a whole lot of real cool stuff for the future that I'm very, very confident is going to pay off.
It's funny the way you were describing things, and put yourself in the put your buyer hat on, as it were. We do that in our tech world. When we're building startups, we tell them to put on the user's hat. Your end user that we're building this gizmo for is not for you, which is a lot of startup people, there's a certain type of person. Usually they are a strong-willed human being that comes into our doors. And for me to tell them that this app isn't yours, it's your users, it's your customers' app. Boy, that's a mind shift for them, because they've got all these ideas of features that they want. This is my app and this is what I want to do. And to get them, and you can usually, Gary and I can usually tell how well this person's going to do through this process, whether they're going to work well with us pretty quickly, because if their ego just can't get out of the way, then we know this is going to be a rough ride. And we'll be really honest about that. It's gotten me in trouble if you've done. But it's the same thing. If your guy, this is my business, what are you doing? It's my baby, right? And they're not putting on that buyer hat, they're going to have that same problem, but worse, because they're never getting out of it, right? They're never selling that sucker because it's yours, not theirs.
Because in the end, they don't actually want to. Yeah, because they're not looking at it as something that they're creating for someone else.
That's a great point, Gary. That is an excellent point, Gary, because I see that too, where they're talking to me, but they don't want to sell. They don't want to sell their baby. They just don't want to.
Well, it's their baby. It's their purpose. I mean, I'm a big proponent of finding purpose, especially when you're older, and you've built this thing for 20 years. It's everything you've done. It's all blood, sweat, and tears, and you can't hand it down to a kid for whatever reason. So now you have to hand it off to a stranger. Man, there's a lot of psychology hiding in there that I am sure that you have to deal with on a regular basis.
Absolutely. And sometimes it is such a roadblock that we just can't go forward.
Yeah.
We just can't do it. And a lot of times it comes into valuations. Valuations are really very difficult because of COVID. You got some businesses that in 2019 they were rocking, and 2020 the government closed them down, and now 2021 maybe they're working their way back, and by the end of 21 they might be up to what they were at the end of 19. Well, everybody wants 3 years. They want 3 years of tax returns and 3 years of financials and all that, and so here us brokers are doing some fancy dancing to try to figure out how we can make that 2020 year go away, and our banker friends are kind of in the same boat, because they're not, they have loan committees and all that stuff that they have to get around, and so they've got to do some kind of a finagle or figure out how that business survived that 2020 year, because so many businesses didn't survive at all.
Yeah, you got to put a little asterisk by it in the book.
Yeah. Well, here's an interesting thing that I hadn't thought of. I wasn't on a podcast, but I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were interviewing. They had a banker and a lawyer and somebody on there, and they were talking about that there were some businesses boomed in 2020, and they mentioned like people that built pools and people that had landscape businesses, because in most states those were essential businesses for some reason. And so people weren't going to Disney World, so they'd build a pool in their backyard. And those people were killing it. And so their business in 2020 went way up. And so the banker says, how are we going to deal with that? Because we can't loan money on 2020, because they're not going to be able to repeat that in 2021, because all those people now are going to go back to Disney World. They're not going to build a pool. So, it's kind of that sword, is sharp.
It's a weird little effect on the timeline for sure.
Yeah, we joke about that. A lot of fitness companies, Peloton, Beachbody. There's several of them that blew up in 2020 because of exactly what you're talking about. People stayed home.
And lost it.
They all made this mistake thinking this was permanent. This was a shift in mind thinking, and no one was going back to the gym.
Until the gym opened.
Yeah, and then the gym opened. I'm picking on the gyms because it specifically, but there was a lot of industries that did this. And then the gyms reopened and their revenue dropped dramatically, and they got caught with their pants down because they did all this. I think Peloton, for instance, bought their biggest competitor, and they bought all this warehouse space so they could start doing all the stuff, but they didn't have the revenue anymore to support all that growth. And it's like, gosh, guys, you should have seen this coming. But anyway, so I want to wrap this up. If I were trying to sell my business, or I want to sell it better off in 2-3 years, and I need to get in touch with you, how would I do that?
Well, we have a website, visionarybusinessbrokerage.com, has all our contact information. It's chock full of stuff, so you can kind of get an idea about our process and what we do, and some things, our little different forms and all that stuff. So I think it's a pretty good website to get a pretty good idea on who we are and what we do. And just give us a call. And we're in Durham, North Carolina, and we work. We have listings all over the state of North Carolina. It's harder for us. We can do the listing part pretty local. The buyers can come from anywhere, but we try to stay in North Carolina as far as the business listings that we use, just because it's closer to home.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been great. This is infinitely fascinating to me. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and give our listeners some answers on questions that they may not be dealing with now, but they certainly will if their startups go well. They will in the future. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it was nice meeting you, Carlton. And I just wanted to say again, to reiterate what David said earlier, it is awesome to see someone that's had that passion for something they wanted to do. And while it might have taken them a little bit longer, they did reignite that passion and come back and start the business they wanted to. So good for you, man.
You bet. And thanks for having me. I appreciate it very much. All
righty. Gary, if they want to talk to us, what do they do?
If they want to get hold of Big Pixel, who builds the tech and all the apps for startups like Vision, well, not for them specifically, but maybe some of the ones that you sell, if they need tech, they can come to us. But they can reach us through email at hello@thebigpixel.net. We're on all the social media sites as well, or you can even leave comments to our YouTube channel where you're going to watch this podcast.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We will talk to you all next week.
All right. See you guys.